The Shameless Man. In the 1990s, we lived in a remote town in the province of Quebec, Canada. The nearest house to ours belonged to our neighbors, who lived 3 kilometers away. At that time, I was 6 years old, and my siblings were 4 and 2 years old. On a cold winter night, we were sleeping huddled together when we were awakened by voices coming from downstairs. It was the voice of a stranger, speaking in a language we couldn't understand, as if talking to himself. Our father told us not to make a sound and went downstairs with his rifle. As the footsteps creaked on the stairs, my breath quickened, praying that the person downstairs, most likely a thief, wouldn't harm my father. After half an hour passed, my father returned, his face pale white. When we asked what happened, he brushed it off, saying it was just a mouse. But I knew he was lying. The next day, my mother finally told me what happened under my persistent questioning. When my father went downstairs, there was a man in the middle of the living room, pacing frantically and muttering to himself. He was walking rapidly, talking to himself at the same time. When my father asked, "Are you okay?" the man suddenly stopped and turned his head towards him. Unable to comprehend what he saw, my father quickly turned back and turned on the lights. But when he returned to the living room, there was no one there. Shocked by the faceless man he had seen just moments ago, my father told us it was just a mouse, and recounted the events to my mother. Shortly after my mother finished telling me the story, one of our neighbors came over, and they started chatting. What I heard made me even more afraid, because the woman who came told my mother that she wanted to know if we were aware of the accident that happened last night. She explained that a young man had died horribly from a tree branch, piercing his head in a car accident. As the woman continued to speak excitedly, the only thing my mother and I could think of was the faceless man who had come to our house last night. Never talk to strangers. I was 7 to 8 years old, and I went shopping with my mother. While he was buying the things he needed, I was looking in the toy section, which was quite normal at that time. At that exact moment, a middle-aged man came up to me and started talking to me. He held my hand and said that he also had a grandchild and was playing football outside right now. We were walking towards the exit door when I suddenly saw my mother waiting in the queue, and I escaped from the man's grasp and ran to her. When I looked back, the man was not there, and I never told this story to avoid getting scolded by my mother. But always, I thought about what would have happened to me if I had gone with him, and I always wondered if there were children holding that man's hand. Sometimes even skeptics get scared. One night at 3 o'clock, I saw flashing lights outside my second-floor bedroom window. A strong scent of incense seemed to accompany the lights. Out of fear, I woke my mother. She was the most skeptical person I know, and told her to watch while I closed the windows. Although he grumbled at first, he became quiet when I came to my room. I closed the windows, and then we both went to bed. The next day, I felt pretty stupid because of my imagination, so when I saw my mom, I apologized. But my mother said it was okay and said, "I saw that too." I froze and asked him what he was talking about. When he realized that I didn't see anything, he dropped the subject and didn't say anything. Even though years have passed, he doesn't say anything about that night. Shadows. The family moved to a new house in a rural area due to financial difficulties. Mother and father, who have 2 children aged 13 and 1, tried to repair the old house as much as they could. But there was nothing more that could be done about the buzzing windows and creaking wood. In the family trying to get used to their new order, the only person who was happy with his situation was little John. The baby, who normally could not stand alone and always wanted to play, was stumbling around the house, smiling to himself, and generally seemed to be having fun. One night, while they were all sleeping, the mother noticed sounds coming from the baby monitor. Apart from John's giggling, there were whispering sounds. Although he first thought that his wife was next to the baby, he was filled with fear when he saw that she was sleeping next to him. He got up from the bed and slowly walked towards the baby's room, and was stunned by the sight in the room, because there were several tall, slender people standing around the baby's cradle. When he turned on the light, they were all gone. "There's someone on the bed." Like every child, he was afraid of the creatures hiding in the closet and the monsters under the bed. For this reason, he never closed his door and listened to the stories his mother or father told him every night until he fell asleep. Another day, he told his father that he was feeling sleepy, and they went to the child's room together. While the child was putting on his pajamas, his father ran to the ringing phone, but only crackling came from the receiver. Thinking there was a problem with the lines, the father returned to his son and saw that he had already gone to bed. And like he did every night, he said, "Let's check if there is a monster under your bed." But when he leaned down, he would just freeze there, because there was his son under the bed, tightly wrapped in his pajamas, and he was whispering in fear and saying, "Dad, there is someone on my bed." When Charlie is gone, I hated it when my brother Charlie left home. Even though my family constantly told me how sick he was, I couldn't break away from this feeling. When I complained about how bored I was without a little sibling, my parents would remind me that my brother was locked in a dark room in a hospital and say that his boredom was much worse than mine. Charlie, who had a brain disease, returned each time only to stay at home for a shorter time than before. But all the treatments failed. Our neighbor's cat's eyes came out of Charlie's toy basket. My mother's vitamins were replaced with dishwasher tablets. My father's razors were found stuck in the children's slide. My family believed that his disorder made him charming and that he would eventually respond to rehabilitation. As for me, every time Charlie left, I acted like it was normal until he came back, and I couldn't wait for my brother to come. Ghost Mother. When my brother and I were little, we moved into a lovely farmhouse with our family. Due to my father's job, we would stay there for 7 to 8 months. But this was no problem for us because both my brother and I loved playing in that house. There was a huge green area outside. In addition, the house was filled with a lot of old items and dozens of trinkets that would pass the time. Besides all this, our favorite part of the house was the kind ghost there. My brother and I named her Anne because of her kindness and compassion. Mother must have been thinking about us a lot because when we woke up in the morning, there was always a glass of milk on our bedside tables. Also, while we were playing games or watching TV, he would sit on the old chair in the living room and watch us, sometimes even bringing the chair to the middle of the room. Mother was with us at every moment, protecting and looking after us, or so we thought. Years later, I accidentally saw the photo of the farmhouse where we stayed in an old newspaper and started reading the news. What was written under the photo of the woman we call Mother showed that she was a widow, that she killed her 2 children by putting poison in milk and then committed suicide by hanging herself in the middle of the living room. And judging by the photo, the chair on which the woman climbed to kill herself was the chair on which she sat and watched us while we played. There is someone in my room. I returned to my college dorm room late that night because I went to a party. When I entered my room, I had a strange feeling that someone else was there. Even though it's hard to describe in words, I was being watched, and it was as if time had stopped. I checked my closet, under the bed, the windows, basically everywhere, but there was no one there. The feeling inside me was still there. I was so scared, I couldn't turn off the light. At that moment, I heard a laugh and felt someone's breath on my neck. I ran out of my room and went to the living room downstairs. When I finally fell asleep in the morning, I saw my great-aunt in her youngest form, in my dream. He came into my room and laughed drunkenly. When I told my dream to my grandmother the next day, she said that it was my aunt's birthday last night. The date showed the day my aunt died in an accident on her way back from a party.